Good morning. Oi.
Check 1, 2. I kind of feel that way too. Let me see. Okay. So there was a new medicine woman in the Seneca village. And okay, there's a new medicine woman in the Seneca village. And all the villagers wanted to find out if you really knew her stuff. So they asked her to be involved and said, so how's this winter going to be? And she said, well, I think just in case, we should gather some extra fire. And all of them went off and got this fire. Then she went off and called them as she goes. Said, how's this winter going to be? This will be what's really hard. So she got all the people together again. She said, listen, we need to gather a lot of fire. And they looked around, but they went off and got them fire. And she imagined the officer and said, hey, are you really sure? What are you going to do? Person said, this sex. So she gathered all the people again. She said, listen, we need to go out here, we need to grab every big, every scrap, every bit of firewood we can get. But 4 weeks later, she looked around. This letter was going to be mild. She called the letter service again. She said, listen, are you sure this is going to be a bad winter? She said, this is going to be one of the worst things you've ever seen. She said, how do you know? The person said, the leaves are gathering fire like crazy. I don't know. I don't think of that. I don't think of that. But it is, but I had to tell it today, because today we're going to be, our service is going to be about some Haudenosaunee autumn traditions. And so there's going to be a story and a poem and then a sermon. We're going to do a whole thing about October traditions and festivals of the indigenous peoples of Western New York. So I'm really excited about it. And then after the service for our adult education, we're gonna learn more about that. So I think we've got an exciting Sunday ahead of us. Welcome to this place which we make holy by our presence. These doors are open to all. We welcome diverse ideas of the source of life, diverse needs, diverse abilities. In this place, the ordinary is sanctified, the human is celebrated, and compassion is strength. Welcome to this place. Together, we make it a holy place. Please join me for the words of the chalice lighting printed inside of your leaflet. May the light we now kindle inspire us to use our powers, and not to harm, to help and not to hinder, to bless and not to curse. Serve you, Spirit of freedom. Now, please stand if you are able for hymn 361. Enter, rejoice, and come in.
Enter, rejoice, and come in. Enter, rejoice, and come in.
This is the time when we usually do a responsive reading, but for this morning, I'd like to instead share a poem. This is by the Mohawk poet E. Pauline Johnson. She wrote it in 1913, describing the corn harvest in October. The poem is going to narrate how there's a single week in autumn when summer seems to reawaken briefly after the first frost, a phenomenon that came to be known insensitively as the Indian summer. And Johnson in this poem evokes how this annual week of warm weather is an ideal time for harvesting crops. Pillowed and hushed on the silent plain, wrapped in her mantle of golden grain, wearied of pleasuring weeks away, summer is lying asleep today. Where winds come sweet from the wild rose briars and summer and smoke, of the far off prairie fires. Yellow her hair as the goldenrod, and brown her cheeks as the prairie sod. Purple her eyes as the mists that dream at the edge of some laggard sun-drowned stream. But over their depths the lashes sweep, for summer is lying today asleep. The north wind kisses her rosy mouth, his rival frowns in the far-off south, and comes caressing her sunburnt cheek, and the summer awakens for one short week, awakes and gathers her wealth of grain, then sleeps and dreams for a year again. I see the leaflet calls for another water ceremony, but I feel like we just did that. So let's wait a year. Do you want to do the joys and concerns? You want me to do it? Okay. So this is the part of the service where we going to take a page from the Quaker tradition. And for those of us who may not recall, the Quakers were, and maybe still are, a church in which instead of having a preacher, people gathered together and they just, somebody feels something inside. They call it quaking, something that kind of wants to be shared. It can be something joyful. It can be something sad. And the person shares this and we listen. And so for our joys and concerns, I invite you to take a moment in silence. And then whatever you feel, kind of shaking around in there, this is a time to come up to the front, let it come out, and light a candle.
Okay, I'll go first. Okay, so this week was a real miserable week for me. I won't mention why. But last Saturday, and since we're talking about Native people, I I was able to meet two more of my maternal brothers. And they're just as crazy as me. So that's a good thing. And I have one more brother to meet, but he is actually a real bush Indian. He literally lives out in the wild somewhere in Ontario. And yeah, I don't know of if you've heard of the 60s scoop, but I was a part of that. That's where the government just said, okay, doesn't matter whether they're from good families, bad families. My mom came home from work and they had come and taken me away. So I missed out on four brothers. We were very small. I never expected that aging would be so challenging. I guess I expected it would be I but a much quieter time, and there are challenges and I'm so glad that we all can be here today.
And somebody on Zoom, Desi, did want to say something.
I just wanted to express or react to what Patty just said. I can't hear you. Desi, I can't hear you. Okay, can you hear me now? Yes. Okay, I just wanted to react to what Patty just said. And I wanted to say to you, Patty, that on one hand, I feel joyful that you're able to connect with your family. And I feel very sad about what happened to you. But I'm your friend and I love you. That's it.
Thank you. Well, the bonus is I was one of the lucky ones and I got a good adoptive family.
And Francie wanted to say something on Zoom as well.
Yes, I just want to say I'm grateful and thankful for Zoom that I can see my old church again and see my beloved friends again. Thank you.
Spirit of life, come unto me. Sing in my heart all the stirrings of compassion. Rise in the sea, move in the land, giving life a ship of justice. Roots hold me close, wings set me free. Spirit of life, come to me, come to me.
Well, normally when I get up here to preach, the first thing I do is say something silly. But today, I'm going to do something different. I'm going to start this message with a story. This is a story. This is a Seneca story from the early 1900s. There were a couple of ethnologists who were going around Iroquois villages collecting stories from the oral tradition. And this is one of many different stories about how people came to cultivate corn. In ancient times, there was a village situated on the banks of a river where people lived on the natural products of forest and stream, that is to say, game and fish, berries, and various edible roots and tubers. There came a day when the people dwelling in this village were told by an old woman that she'd heard the voice of a maiden singing on the river. And the words of this strange singer were, "Luxuriant and fine are the planted fields where I dwell." When they heard about this, the women of the village, going to the riverbank for 3 nights, sang songs of welcome and recognition. And on the 3rd night, they perceived that the singer on the river had drawn nearer to them. On the 4th night, the women watching with their children on the riverbank and singing in response to the singing on the river were surprised to see coming toward them a large number of women. One of the little girls exclaimed, "Oh, grandmother, do not let this woman seize us." And the children ran away. But the spokeswoman, who was the eldest person present, said, "I alone will remain here to await whatever may befall me." At this, the midstream singer exclaimed, "Take me with you, because I am not able to go there." Then the grandmother placed her canoe of birch bark in the stream, and soon by rapid paddling reached the side of the young woman. She found her lying on the back of a beaver which mysteriously held her above the water. Again, the maiden said, "Take me there." The grandmother, replying, "Your wish will be fulfilled," helped her into the canoe and headed for the shore. When they landed, the maiden said, "I will remain here and you must come after me in the morning." The grandmother returned to her own lodge, where she related in detail what had taken place. Early the next morning, she returned to the riverbank, and there she saw only the growing stalk of a plant. Drawing near, she found on the stalk an ear of corn, and breaking it off, she carried it back to her lodge, where she hung it up on a roof-supporting pole by the fireplace. During the night, the grandmother had a dream or vision in which the maiden said, "You should unhang me from this place. It's too hot here. Put me in the ground, plant me, and then leave me there, for I will provide for you and for your people, you human beings." So she took down the ear of corn, and after shelling it, she planted the grains in the ground, just as she had been instructed by the dream. On the following night, the grandmother again dreamed, and the maiden said to her, "You and your people must care for me. You must not permit weeds to kill me. You'll see me sprout and grow to maturity, and in the future, all the people who will be born will see that I will provide for them. I am corn. I am native corn. I am sweet corn. I am the first corn that came or was delivered to this earth. But you must tell the human beings that they must not waste the corn, which will grow to maturity in the future. Those who do not honor and properly care for me invariably come to destitution. For unless they take care of me, I will take all of the corn and the other seed away." The grandmother carefully followed these instructions. And in the autumn, she harvested the corn, and taking it into her lodge, she divided it into as many portions as there were families in the village. Then she gave kernels to the chief matron in each lodge, telling them that the corn should be used in the spring for seed, and also how it should be planted and cultivated. Afterward, she returned to her own longhouse. She gratefully rejoiced at the prospect of her people having something which would supply them with a staple food if they would properly care for it. In this story, a clan matron is summoned in visions by the emissary, to be the emissary between the human world and the realm of the crop spirits. The story contains a larger meeting where the village women and children greet a multiplicity of crop spirits, but this proves overwhelming, and the agreement must be made between a singular visionary and the corn maiden. An ethnologist in the early 1900s observed that each Iroquois village would annually elect a chief matron to supervise the communal planting and harvesting. And this story gives an origin for that tradition. The treaty established between them is one of mutual benefit, reciprocity. Humans will nurture the corn, and the corn will provide for the people. A contemporary Native American described this relationship saying, "How generously they shower us with food, literally giving themselves so that we can live. But in their giving, their lives are also ensured. Our taking returns benefit to them in the circle of life, making life the chain of reciprocity. Living by the precepts of the honorable harvest, to take only what is given, to use it well, to be grateful for the gift, and to reciprocate the gift." The morning of the Haudenosaunee harvest ceremony was a time for dancing. The feather dance, in which a blue crane feather was held aloft. The feather dance was a light, graceful shuffle accompanied by the airy rustle of turtle shell rattles, and followed by specific dances of thanksgiving to each of the three sisters or sustainers, the corn, squash, and beans. And then the work of the harvesting would begin. Arthur Parker, who grew up on the Cattaraugus Seneca Reservation, recalls the harvest from his childhood in the late 1800s. Village women, sometimes men as well, would go into the cornfields with large baskets on their backs, plucking ears of corn, which they would drop over their left shoulder. When the day's heat was past, the corn would be husked under the watchful eye of Grandmother Moon. Parker wrote, "A roaring fire of sumac brush and logs tempered the crisp air of the night, but left it sufficiently invigorating to keep up spirits and keep the workers active. These were night carnivals with the smell of the corn plant, the breath of the pines blown through the autumn wind, the smoke of the fragrant burning wood, and the pure merriment of the workers." The Seneca had a corn shucking game in which if someone stripped an ear of corn to find that all of the kernels were red, they would receive 2 husked ears from each person present, and this could amount to quite a pile. Discovering an ear with only 2 rows of kernels would win the person 1 husked ear from each person present. And if someone stripped an ear and there were no kernels at all, somebody would give them 1 stripped ear just as a consolation prize. Although much of the work was done by women, it was not uncommon for men to join. One ethnologist wrote, "They were lured to the scene by the promise of soup and song and the society of wise old matrons and shy maidens. The old women carefully noted the industry of their younger assistants, and scheming parents were able to obtain information about prospective mates for their children. The older men did some work," he wrote, "but not much. They aired their wisdom by making wise observations, but soon lost their reserve in narrating exciting stories of personal adventure or by relating folk tales. They knew full well that a pail full of soup awaited them when the husking ceased, whether they had worked or not." At a modern Oneida harvest festival, participants will braid corn cobs together into tall, beautiful collections that are a physical representation of the unbroken years of resilience, imbued in the braids and community working together to create the braids. Some of the corn from the harvest would be roasted immediately or boiled into soup or bread flavored with venison oil, berries, and some maple sugar. Some of the corn was buried in pits or preserved in bark barrels inside the Longhouse or hung to dry from the rafters to last through the winter. And some seeds were soaked in bowls to sprout in preparation for the next year's planting. Patsy Cook, a modern Mohawk, shared a story about corn and family. After many years of hearing her children complain about the time and effort of grinding corn for traditional bread with an old hand crank grinder, she bought a machine that could process kernels into flour in minutes. But later she realized that she missed the hours spent with family in the kitchen, chatting and cranking. She said, "Well, I just put that fancy new machine in the bottom of the cupboard and attached the old metal grinder to the kitchen table again, so I could spend the time talking with my children as we ground corn." The traditional Haudenosaunee diet was a healthy balance of corn, squash, beans, and berries with occasional fish and meat. Corn and beans combine into a complete protein. Squash adds carbohydrates and sugar. But beyond chemical nutrition, the familial and communal aspects of food production and consumption add an essential element of nurture. In modern Western New York, autumn is a busy time to prepare our homes for the coming winter. For some of us, getting the kids ready for school. For some of us, digging through storage boxes for coats and scarves and mittens, pulling out the quilts, checking the window casings. School and sports and autumn activities begin, first like a few falling leaves, and then like an avalanche. And somewhere in the midst of that bustle, it's really nice to slow down and bake a pie, or stir a soup, or fill the fridge with casseroles. It's a good season for some nice, heavy home cooking. You put on a little winter weight that no one will notice under our sweaters. We don't necessarily go out and harvest our food, except my children, who are prepping for the annual candy harvest on Halloween. Most of which, I may note, is made of processed corn syrup. They ask me, if this candy is all corn syrup, is it a vegetable? And I'm afraid to let them know that actually candy corn is a vegetable. It's just not one that's very good for you. But even if we're not out picking our crops, there's something special this time of year about a warm, scented kitchen and the magic that comes from preparing a meal. Western New York creates tough, hardy people. We're not necessarily indigenous to this land, but we have been shaped by it. And this land continues to shape its inhabitants regardless of our ethnic origin. I cannot say that we are in some way a continuation of the traditions of the Haudenosaunee, but thinking about these stories and customs, families gathering, bonding activities, respect for the community of life, I feel a strong admiration for the natives of Western New York. And I think that there's a good deal that we can learn from them. Thank you. Our closing hymn, number 131, Love Will Guide Us.
Love will guide us, peace has tried us, hope inside us will lead the way on the road from
Actually, I have an exciting announcement. I'm excited about it anyway. For many years, actually, I think for like 7 years, I've been here on the second Sunday of each month. And this month, I've been invited to come here on another Sunday. So I will be here again, I think on October 30th. I think that's the date. And today's sermon, you may have noticed, did not contain any of my like stupid personal stories. And so I've decided for October 30th, that's what I'm going to do for my whole sermon. I'm just going to tell one long personal story about my disastrous move to Milwaukee back in 2004, which I never talk about. So you may have noticed in 7 years of me telling stories about my life, never tell any stories about Wisconsin. So I thought like, oh, it's a special Sunday and what am I going to do? So I'm going to do that. So I'm excited about that. And in about 40 minutes, we'll continue with our adult education series, after coffee hour, and we'll be looking at some, kind of further at some Iroquois beliefs and practices. Together, we have sanctified this space. If you have found strength and comfort here, share some out there. They need it. Remember that you are blessed and you are a blessing and you are not alone. Please join me for the words of the chalice extinguishing. We extinguish this chalice, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
High in the sky I go, walking in the sky I go, high above the way below, way below. By my side the bird will go, bird and I above the way below, way below. High across the sky I go, walking with a bird I go, all around the sky we go, all around we go, in the sky we go, bird and I we fly. That